The Brooklyn Tabernacle, located in the heart of downtown Brooklyn, New York, is well known for its diverse congregation and powerful music ministry. Co-founded in 1966 as the Brooklyn Gospel Tabernacle by Pastor Clair Hutchins, the father-in-law of current pastor Jim Cymbala, the church has grown from a small prayer group into a significant spiritual and cultural institution, welcoming thousands of worshipers each week. Under the leadership of Pastor Jim Cymbala, who took over in the early 1970s, the Brooklyn Tabernacle has experienced tremendous growth. Pastor Cymbala, along with his wife Carol, who directs the renowned Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, has been instrumental in shaping the church's mission and outreach programs. Their combined efforts have fostered a community where faith, hope, and love are central themes, reaching far beyond the confines of their physical location. The Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, an integral part of the church's identity, has achieved international acclaim. Comprising over 200 voices, the choir is known for its soul-stirring performances and has won multiple Grammy Awards. Their music, which blends contemporary gospel with traditional hymns, serves as a powerful tool for worship and evangelism, attracting people from various backgrounds and cultures. When President Barack Obama was sworn in as President of the United States, it was the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir that was chosen to sing the battle hymn of the Republic. The Brooklyn Tabernacle has a global presence, with its services and music reaching millions through broadcasts, recordings, and live streaming platforms. This global reach has solidified its reputation as a beacon of faith and inspiration, drawing visitors and worshippers from around the world. The story told of the Brooklyn Tabernacle is one of perseverance, faith, and the relentless pursuit of spiritual and community well-being. But is that story accurate? Is the Brooklyn Tabernacle a healthy community for Christians? Reverend Clair Hutchins was a pivotal figure in the Pentecostal and charismatic movements of the mid-20th century. During the height of the Latter Rain movement, Hutchins began his ministry as the music director at Philadelphia Church in Chicago, under the leadership of Joseph Matson Bose, a prominent leader in Latter Rain. This role positioned Hutchins at the epicenter of a revival that emphasized spiritual gifts, prophetic utterances, and a controversial form of leadership. Latter Rain embraced a very authoritarian version of church leadership, using an extremist version of the fivefold ministry doctrine. When the Assemblies of God denounced Latter Rain as dangerous heresy, it created deep divisions in Pentecostalism. The Philadelphia Church was one of the most outspoken churches in favor of the authoritarian structure and heretical doctrines, and embraced some very dangerous people in religious history. When William Branham was exposed as a racist who was spreading the two-seed doctrine of Christian identity, and was denounced by hundreds of ministers, it was the Philadelphia Church that salvaged Branham's quickly failing ministry. It was also the Philadelphia Church that ordained the infamous Jim Jones of People's Temple into the Independent Assemblies of God and helped launch his career as a Latter Rain minister. Hutchins' connections with key figures such as A.W. Rasmussen, founder of the Independent Assemblies of God International, and William Branham, a central figure in the Latter Rain movement, further solidified his influence. As a senior pastor at Beulah Temple in Chicago and later at Maranatha Temple in Brooklyn, Hutchins not only led congregations but also actively participated in the broader movements shaping Pentecostalism. In the mid-1960s, Hutchins co-founded the Brooklyn Gospel Tabernacle alongside Edward Maurer Jr. The church quickly became known for its powerful prayer meetings and the renowned Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir. Hutchins' ministry extended beyond local congregations. He was actively involved in the Voice of Healing movement, collaborating with evangelists like Morris Cerullo and Gordon Lindsay. His participation in the Full Gospel Business Men's Fellowship International further expanded his influence, connecting him with prominent Christian leaders and televangelists. In the autumn of 1971, Pastor Jim Cymbala and his wife Carol took over the leadership of a struggling congregation in Brooklyn. At that time, the Brooklyn Tabernacle was a small group of just 40 people meeting in a rundown building on Atlantic Avenue. Despite the humble beginnings and the many challenges they faced, Jim and Carol Cymbala were determined to revitalize the church. Throughout the 1980s, the Brooklyn Tabernacle began to transform. One significant milestone was the purchase of the former Carlton Theatre at 292 Flatbush Avenue. The Cymbalas converted this 1,383-seat theatre into a vibrant place of worship, and the congregation grew steadily. In 1984, the church removed the word gospel from its name, making a clear separation from its latter-rain roots and opening the door for expanding its appeal. Over time, the Brooklyn Tabernacle became widely known, particularly for its music ministry. Directed by Carol Cymbala, the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir gained international acclaim, earning 6 Grammy Awards. The choir's powerful performances became a hallmark of the church, drawing people from around the world to experience their music and worship. In 2002, to accommodate the growing congregation, the Brooklyn Tabernacle moved to a new location, the former Lowe's Metropolitan Theater at 17 Smith Street. This grand sanctuary, with a seating capacity of 3,300 people, provided a fitting home for the expanding church community and its celebrated choir. Under the leadership of Jim and Carol Cymbala, the Brooklyn Tabernacle evolved from a dwindling congregation into a non-denominational megachurch. From the surface, the Brooklyn Tabernacle seemed like a healthy and thriving church. Pastor Cymbala mended the relationship with the Assemblies of God, which had denounced the latter-rain movement, from which the church formed much of its doctrine through Clair Hutchins. Cymbala was a featured speaker at AOG events, including an annual General Council meeting and a prayer summit. His father-in-law, Clair Hutchins, had founded the World Film Crusade in 1973 to purchase and distribute the rights to the motion picture The Cross and the Switchblade, based on a book by David Wilkerson, starring Pat Boone as David Wilkerson and Eric Estrada as Nicky Cruz. Cymbala carried the mission forward by working with the AOG ministry, Adult and Teen Challenge, which was conceived after Wilkerson's book. Cymbala also formed a strong bond with the Christian and Missionary Alliance through Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Though the last years of Zacharias' life were marked by egregious crimes, abuses, and corrupt activities widely published in newspapers and magazines from Christianity Today to the New York Times, Cymbala remained by Zacharias' side and was one of the featured speakers at his funeral. Not all was bliss at the Brooklyn Tabernacle, and similar allegations were raised among members of the congregation. In 2021, Paul Brewer stepped forward, alleging that he was sexually abused and assaulted by a pastor of the Brooklyn Gospel Tabernacle from 1975 through 1979, between the ages of 3 and 7. According to Brewer, the crime was committed at the church and other possible locations. Brewer claimed that his mother had reported the abuse to church employees. The court docket described the perpetrator as a serial predator who committed the same crime with several other minors during his years as pastor. When members attempted to review church finances, they discovered that the Brooklyn Tabernacle had fully concealed their accounting data. While other churches disclosed their finances in IRS Form 990, the Brooklyn Tabernacle did not. Instead, the church required all questions to be directed to Pastor Cymbala in his office. With growing questions about financial misconduct, the Brooklyn Tabernacle pastoral staff released a statement in a public forum shifting financial responsibility to an accounting firm. However, it was later learned that the Brooklyn Tabernacle had secured that firm just 2 months prior to the announcement. In 2017, Cymbala partnered with Stephen Vornier to assist with what he described as mounds of debt on all properties. Vornier helped Cymbala restructure all of his debt, and in exchange, Cymbala connected Vornier to many other pastors and faith-based operations. According to the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, Vornier had devised a scheme to commit securities fraud and had already had his license to sell securities revoked in other states. The Brooklyn Tabernacle also engaged Vornier in what appears to be sketchy legal actions against their neighbors. In 2020, the Brooklyn Tabernacle purportedly committed an act of fraud by forging a sworn affidavit to be signed by Jim Cymbala, who was out of town at the time. A month later, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Brooklyn Tabernacle allegedly committed a criminal act by cutting off the water supply to that same neighbor. From a church leadership perspective, the Brooklyn Tabernacle appears to have retained the authoritarian aspects of its latter-rain history. Deetra, whose lifelong dream was to sing in the choir, auditioned before the pastor's wife at the Brooklyn Tabernacle. After a wonderful rendition of Amazing Grace, she was told that she had passed the audition and would soon join the choir. Shortly after, she was forced to meet with the pastor's son, who was acting as a so-called church counselor. The son began to pry into her marital affairs, refused to let her join the choir, and attempted to get her husband's phone number in an apparent attempt to further pry into her private life. An important lesson can be learned from the Brooklyn Tabernacle. Finding a healthy church is much more than selecting a mega-church based on its popularity and appearance of spiritual bliss. One must engage in critical thought. If the church shares a history with destructive movements and dangerous individuals, it is essential to examine its leadership and doctrine to see if it has progressed in the right direction. Above all, prospective members of any church should consider transparency a deciding factor. If the church attempts to hide its history from its members, how can that church claim to have learned from its historical mistakes?